All right, welcome to episode 15 of the Sherveen Show, where we connect the dots between tech, startups, business, and society. Let's get into it. We got some fun topics around AI, social media, and a bunch else. Let's start with TikTok. So if you didn't catch it, Mark Cuban wants to fund a competitor, and his whole idea is that it should be on the AT protocol, which is also what Blue Sky is built on. And the whole idea of these decentralized protocols is that the users, the content, all of the information is decentralized, which essentially means anybody could build on top of content that exists or lives on the protocol. The advantage of this would be that if anyone builds an app, like he's asking for a TikTok competitor on top of this protocol, then another company, another startup, another person could also build on top of that protocol and offer their own app and their own experience. And so let's say that first company to build an application and acquire users is not exactly building what the users want, then other competitors come in and build a new experience or have different sets of policies, etc. What I think this misses is what makes a lot of these social media companies so valuable, both to their users and to their shareholders. Let's just imagine that TikTok was actually built on this network. The problem would be that at any given moment, another company would come and build an app to compete. And while this might at first seem really appealing, if you're a user going, yeah, I love competition, I want different experiences, I want curation, the problem is TikTok would then have less of an incentive to think about their creator fund or investing in new features or investing in marketing. Because as soon as it's possible for one of their competitors to swoop in and just steal all of the users and the engagement that they're building on, the less likely they're going to be to invest inside that ecosystem. Companies want to own the relationship to the user, to the advertiser, and that is what incentivizes them to create experiences that, yes, on the margin, there are things that we wish were better. For the most part, our user preferences clearly are telling us that platforms like Instagram, like X, like TikTok are things that we value. We value these companies building not only features around marketing and content creation, but also security, ease of use, and all of that jazz. So again, interesting move from Mark, but I'm not sure that something built on a decentralized protocol is going to get nearly the amount of investment required to actually compete with a centralized company like a TikTok. The other thing I want to touch on is not everyone seems to understand why Reels and YouTube Shorts are not natural replacements. I've seen this conversation a lot online. They're not the natural go-to after a TikTok. If you use TikTok a lot, you probably understand this dynamic. A lot of the innovation comes in that For You page, the algorithm. And the idea that on TikTok, you're not always fully anonymous, but because it doesn't rely so much on who already follows you or your network, even when you use your real name, you're more anonymous than you are, let's say, than on Instagram, where if you post a reel, it is very likely that your friends, the people who follow you, those are going to be the people who see it, or at least will be part of that audience. And the same thing is also true of YouTube Shorts. That one builds more on creators who, invest in YouTube branding and they have long form videos and there's a whole community and ecosystem. In other words, neither of these platforms really have the vibe of like, just take your phone out, put it in selfie mode, press record, and upload, and you might reach somebody who's in a completely different state or completely different country. They've built similar algorithms and For You pages, but again, the nature of them, the basis of them is who you know and friendships that you actually have in the real world. So if you're wondering why Reels and YouTube Shorts are not just the easy answer for people who love TikTok, that's why. The last interesting note here is the CEO of TikTok Show is headed back to DC, but this time for Trump's inauguration, he'll be on the dais with Mark Zuckerberg, Bezos, and others, which is probably an indication that Trump is continuing to lean towards thinking that maybe this app doesn't need to be banned, both because he thinks its users have never been in more favor of him and his candidacy, but also because a lot of financiers and stakeholders and shareholders have been pressuring him over the past few months, and he might want to keep those folks as friends. We'll see, but again, probably an indication that it isn't going away anytime soon. Let's go into AI Corner, and let's talk specifically about two different media partnerships coming out of OpenAI and Google, respectively, that I think are interesting and an indication of what's to come in 2025. So the first one is OpenAI is partnering with Axios, which you may know as a news publication, and it's actually funding the expansion of 3 new local newsrooms. They'll be in Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Boulder, and Huntsville. And what's interesting about this is a traditional content partnership between, let's say, an AI company and a media company would be for licensing of data, to use the data in training, maybe to get real-time information, and there'd be some revenue going back to the media company. In this case, the form of revenue is going to be the expansion, the operational expansion of Axios with these newsrooms. And again, I'm sure that OpenAI is getting the rights to train on that content, use the content inside their models. But more importantly, related to a broader trend happening in the AI and LLM space, a lot of these companies have been coming out and saying, hey, we have run out of really useful, really high quality data. We've used most of the public internet, we've used most of the books out there, and we need more. And yes, some of these companies have moved to synthetic data, so they've relied on LLMs to generate data that they can then use to train future LLMs. But high quality human data is still the thing that a lot of people value and rely on. And so OpenAI essentially is funding the creation of more data. It's not just passing revenue back to Axios in this content partnership. It's saying, hey, we want more information. We want to expand your ability to create net new high quality human data that we might use to train future models. And I think this is something we're going to see more of in 2025. Related and a bit of a simpler media partnership is Google and the Associated Press, where Google wants to use real-time information as part of its suite of Gemini products. Again, a little bit more straightforward of a media partnership, but it's interesting to see how these different companies are going to take different approaches and strategies towards saying, hey, we want to fund media companies to generate more training data for us. Maybe we appreciate creatives, and so we want to fund what they will provide and build on top of our tools. Or in the case of Google, we want real-time information to make our LLMs useful no matter the moment or the context of a user's question. Yes, it's true, a lot of these media companies already have these partnerships, but again, in 2025, expect to see a whole lot more. One of my favorite topics, the AI arms race between job seekers and employers. Both are racing to use as many AI tools as possible and ruin each other's lives. And the latest is LinkedIn releasing two different tools, one, again, for job seekers and one for recruiters. For job seekers, we have a job match. And what LinkedIn's promising to do is use large language models to do an interpretive version of telling you whether you're fit for a job. So they already have skill-based matching where whatever you fill out in your profile is compared to whatever a company filled out when they were posting a job description. Now we can expect a large language model to be interpreting resumes and getting an understanding of a person, doing the same thing on the job description side. And it's more likely to do job fit based off of meaning and understanding than just strict keyword matching. And then for recruiters, they're offering an AI recruitment agent. The word agent's being overused right now within tech, but the whole idea is that this agent will help employers end-to-end with posting of job descriptions, finding of candidates, the sorting of candidates once they're either in a sourced or application workflow. And again, rather than just using filters or more traditional methods of machine learning like LinkedIn Recruiter already does, these tools are going to be more interpretive because they'll employ large language models to better understand the meaning behind all of the criteria and the words rather than simply using hard-coded filters and features. This reminded me of an announcement in September of 2024 from one of the more emerging applicant tracking systems, Ashby, adding a whole suite of tools using large language models for more, again, interpretive judgments. As an example, one of the things that they're now offering employers is the ability to tell an AI the criteria by which they're trying to evaluate candidates, and the AI will do a more interpretive pass as to whether a particular candidate or resume fits the bill. So rather than a recruiter, for example, needing to look to see if a candidate has 8 years of experience in B2B SaaS, a large language model will read the resume, understand the person's background, all the companies they've been in, and even if it doesn't say XYZ number of years in B2B SaaS, the large language model will understand the candidate's context and tell the recruiter whether the person meets or beats that criteria. And I do like the idea of these interpretive LLMs that will provide some judgment to both sides, but not make decisions for either side. So it'll tell you whether you're a fit or a candidate's a fit. But I still worry that what we're moving towards is more people using AI auto-appliers or AI screeners. And so every time a recruiter adds an AI toolkit, candidates will respond by adding their own AI toolkit. And so more applications go in, making recruiters' lives harder, which means they'll employ more of these tools, which means candidates will respond because job search already sucks with the usage of more AI tools on their own. And so more volume from job seekers will cause more screening tooling from the recruiter and employer side, which just perpetuates a collective action problem. I'm not sure how to fix it. I do think about it quite a lot, but because we're in the middle of this moment, I have no idea what's going to happen next. Job search, as always, fundamentally broken. Good luck to us all. Next topic. All right, just a few things to wrap us up here that I think are worth paying attention to. The first is 2 new papers on large language model architectures that I think are worth watching. The first one's out of Google, and they are the ones who put out the Attention is All You Need paper that was a kind of a revolution in large language models, and now they've got Titans. And the whole idea of Titans is to solve the memory problem within AI architecture. The challenge with these models is that they're constrained in their context window. In other words, what they remember as a conversation evolves, and there's more information being sent back and forth in conversation. And so something you said 20 messages ago, it might suddenly forget. And the model makers have tried to solve this, but the issue is whenever they either increase the context windows, there might be less accuracy and performance on what is being remembered, or there are primitive solutions like retrieval augmented generation, where the model goes and finds information in an outside data source. But again, the accuracy and precision of that is going to decay because it has to go outside of its own context window to retrieve that information. And what Titans proposes is 3 memory modules. The first being short-term memory, again, kind of what we're already experiencing, the context window inside any given conversation. The second is a dedicated long-term memory module that has its own version of attention. And so as you're having a conversation and you're engaging an LLM in its short-term memory, a long-term memory is being updated based on what it thinks is important, surprising, new, key information that needs to be either updated, forgotten, stored for the first time. And it's paying attention to that separate from the memory being used inside the conversation. And this happens to actually be kind of like how our own brains work. Different parts of our brain are activated when we're inside of a conversation and talking about short-term topics or engaged in a short-term reaction, versus when we're either trying to remember a piece of data or a past memory and we're going to engage different parts of our brain. And by separating these memory modules, both can dedicate resources to doing their job well. In the case of that long-term memory, again, paying attention to what it should remember, how it should update its priors, and what it should forget. And the third module is persistent memory, and you can think of this as things that are immovable and should not be changed. So maybe your date of birth, that is a fact that kind of is set in stone. And different from long-term memory, and that long-term memory should be updated over time. So again, long-term memory might be what I think of your character, which is updated as I get new information and interact with you more. I want to update my perception of you in my long-term memory, but in my persistent memory, your date of birth is set in stone unless you lied to me. And so again, we can think of those as kind of like facts. And again, memory just unlocks a whole lot of LLM use cases, so super interesting to see Google attack this problem. The second paper is called Transformer Squared, out of a Japanese R&D lab called Sakana AI. And the whole idea is a self-adaptive LLM. So something to understand about how these large language models work is they have weights. When they're trained, they have an understanding of how words relate to each other, and there's a whole bunch of math involved, but essentially that stores itself in weights and biases, and those weights are what a model relies on to understand the context and relationship between words whenever it's responding to you. But they're set in stone at the point of training. And so when you interact with that model, it's going to respond to you using the set in stone weights. A self-adaptive LLM would be able to adjust its weights at the time it's conversing with you or interacting with you through an application at inference time, allowing it to more effectively adapt to new tasks. As a very trivial example, let's say that we think about the word greyhound that has some relationship to the word dog and the word bus. And so let's say you engage the LLM in a conversation about transportation. The whole idea is that the LLM would actually be able to classify the task and adjust its weights so that it lives more in transportation and mobility and vehicles and all the things, again, related to a transportation conversation rather than a conversation about dogs or both. And its performance and its specificity and its accuracy when it's being adapted to a particular task is going to be much, much higher. Super interesting. Both of these papers still early. We want to see implementations of these theories and of their early tests, but worth paying attention to overall. The last thing here is just a link that I recommend people read. Hunter Walk is a longtime VC. And in 2017, he wrote something that I think he might have actually retweeted today that made me reread his article about tech no longer being the underdog. And again, this was written in 2017. In the piece, he explores this whole idea that we're no longer the people building in our garages and our basements, that everyone's rooting for, but again, that we've taken the power position and now we're being treated differently and we don't know how to handle it. When you become as powerful as tech has become, then you have obligations and responsibilities as a society. You have different people interfacing with you that don't have all of your context. And you're having impact on people who don't have as much of a direct relationship as back in the day when only tech early adopters were the ones who were using your products. And therefore, the relationship of who's rooting for you, who's trying to hold you accountable, who's trying to critique you, that all changes. And Hunter was making the point back in 2017 that tech is already not good at understanding this dynamic and is adapting pretty poorly. And I'd say that has continued. And so in a day and age when a lot of tech is heading to DC, I think his piece is worth a reread. Check it out. Okay, that was the Sherveen Show. If you're not already subscribed, please do wherever you're listening or watching to this thing. You'll get more news wrap-ups like this one and interviews with founders, subject matter experts, people building the future, and all that jazz. Episode 15 in the books. See you next time.